In the Module 9 assignment, you're going to be developing a tool to help you visualize and understand the scope of geologic time, to really get a better sense of how old the Earth is and where important events in Earth's history have occurred relative to today. And so the first thing we need to do is select the important geologic events that you're going to be using throughout the rest of this part of the assignment. You're going to need 13 events, 10 of which everyone is going to do. There's a table given in D2L, which I'm showing over here. So everyone's going to be doing these events, but you're also going to be picking 3 more from the other table linked in D2L. And you can pick 3, any 3 is fine. Some of the events in the table here are given in billions of years, some of them in millions of years. And so if you select any events from this part of that table, which are given in billions of years before present, you're going to have to convert them to millions of years. So the example that I'm going to be using, which happens to be listed in the table above, is the formation of the so-called banded iron formation, which are the rocks shown in this picture. Banded iron formation is a type of sedimentary rock which we think formed on the seafloor, and it's often looks like this with these alternating bands of darker color and lighter color. The darker color, the dark red color, are oxidized iron-bearing minerals like hematite or magnetite. And they're oxidized, meaning there was oxygen available to produce the oxidation reaction, so-called rusting. This is important because this is the oldest evidence we have for oxygen on the surface of the Earth. So this was in the ocean. There wasn't necessarily free oxygen available in the atmosphere. That took another billion-plus years to develop in the atmosphere. But nonetheless, these rocks are important in that they tell us when oxygen was first available on the surface of the Earth. So these banded iron formations are about 3.8 billion years old. So we need all of our numbers, all of our ages in millions of years for the rest of this exercise. So the first thing you need to do, if you select any from this part of the table, you just need to take that number, multiply by 1,000, and that'll give you the equivalent age in millions of years. So your job here is to select these 10 events plus 3 more of your choosing, and to start a table such as what I've shown here. And then we're going to be recording 2 things in this table. One is the name of our events, so banded iron formations form, age in millions of years before present, we just figured out is 3,800 millions of years BP before present. And so your 13 events will go here in the table. You're going to need to calculate the ages in millions of years. This last column of the table we'll get to here shortly. Second step is you're going to need a rope. It could be a string, it could be a long piece of tape. Anything that's longer than about 10 feet that can be laid out in a straight line. The straight line part is critical. And so throughout the rest of this and the example that I'm going to be showing later, I used a piece of rope. If you don't have rope, find a long piece of string, find a long piece of tape, a long piece of anything that can be stretched out in a straight line that is at least 10 feet long. So the first thing we need to do is measure the length of our rope. And so here's my rope. All right, and so here's the beginning of the rope, and here's the end of the rope. And I'm going to use a tape measure, and this rope happens to be, I'm going to make this up, 17 feet long. Yours will be different, of course. In the example I'll show you later, I made measurements in meters, but you're probably more familiar with feet, so as I discuss this hypothetical example, I'm going to use feet as well. So the total length of the rope is, let's say, 17 feet. Now, the next step, what we need to do is label along the rope 1 foot increments. So you're going to take little pieces of tape and measure 1 foot. There's 1 foot. Put a little piece of tape on the rope. There's 2, there's 3, there's 4, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc., etc., until you get to the end. This is going to be useful later in order to place certain events along the rope at certain distances. So here you need to measure the rope, figure out the total length of the rope. We're going to need this number here later. And take little pieces of tape or little clips, anything that you can attach to the rope and measure out in 1 foot increments. All right, next step is to create little labels. Take a sticky note or a small piece of paper at the beginning of the rope and another one at the end and label them. So this is 0 million years before present. In other words, this end of the rope represents today and the other end of the rope represents 4,600 million years ago, million years before present, and this is the beginning of the Earth. So a rope now represents the history of the Earth, where the end on the left is present day and the end on the right is when the Earth formed. So you can think of the rope as the entire history of the Earth. The Earth formed on the right end and time progressed to the left end. What we're going to be doing here shortly is putting various important geologic events along this new rope timeline. Step 3 is to calculate where on this new time scale, where on our rope time scale, your 13 events fall. We're going to take their ages in geologic ages and convert them to the equivalent rope distance to our new geologic time scale. So here's how we do this. All right, so to calculate your rope position from your geologic age, you take the age of the event, you divide by the age of the Earth, and you multiply by your rope length. So for my example of the banded iron formation, the age of my event is 3,800 million years before present, million years ago. I divide by the age of the Earth, that's 4,600, using round numbers here, and I multiply by the rope length, which was 17 feet. And it turns out, rounded to one decimal place, that's 14.0 feet. In other words, 3,800 million years ago corresponds to about 14 feet down the rope, which is here. So the Earth started on this end, and this is present day. These banded iron formations occurred approximately there, very near to the beginning of the Earth, quite far relative to today. So that's how you do it. You take each age, divide by 4,600, multiply by the length of your rope. So you need to do this 13 times and record those numbers in the table. So again, I have my banded iron formations form 3,800 million years ago, or million of years before present, and it corresponds to 14.0 feet in my new time scale, that is in rope distance. So you're going to be doing this 13 times for all of your events. The first 10 should be the same, everyone is doing those, and the last 3 will of course be custom depending on which of those events that you chose. The next step is to place all of those events along the rope. So with sticky notes or small pieces of paper, you're going to take your 13 events, sort of like I'm showing here. So I have my hypothetical rope laid out with little tick marks. You'll have little pieces of tape on your rope denoting 1 foot increments. And you're going to put a bunch of labels. Here's an event, here's an event, here's a very recent event, here's an older event, etc., etc., etc. You're going to have 13 important geologic events throughout the history of the Earth. Each one will have a calculated rope distance, and then you just figure out where that rope distance is along the rope and label each. What we've done here is created an alternative time scale, one that we can visualize and see relative to today or relative to the beginning of the Earth, where these important geologic events happened. The next step is to take a few photos of your new rope geologic timeline. You're going to need a photo of the whole timeline. Here's an example of mine on the left. You'll see more of this here on the next slide. And you're going to need a few photos of some of your events. So take a nice digital photo of your entire timeline and photo of 3 of your geologic events. The next part of the assignment is to create a short narrated video showing your new geologic timescale. You can use your phone to record a relatively short video, something like 1 or 2 minutes, and just to show us what your timescale looks like. Show us the end of the rope that represents present day, the end of the rope that represents the beginning of the Earth, and some of the events along your rope. It doesn't need to be anything fancy or anything complicated. I just want to see your timescale in video form with your voice narrating it. I have an example of the video that I created for my timescale. I'm not able to show it. I'm not able to have that video play within this video, but I provided a separate link for that in D2L. And so when you're finished watching this, you can go watch that and see the sort of short narrated video that I created. Okay, let's just review what the things are that you need to turn in for this assignment. There are 2 things that you need to turn in. First of all, a document with Part 1. Part 1 was the analysis of the geologic time diagram, putting the orders of events in the right order from oldest to youngest, and a little analysis of some of the geologic time principles. Part 2 is the new geologic time scale, the rope time scale, which we just created. And so in that document for Part 2, you're going to submit the table of events, that is the list of the events, their ages, and the calculated rope distances. You're going to submit a photo of your entire timeline so I can see the whole thing from beginning to end. You're going to submit 3 photos of 3 of your events along your timeline up close. You pick which 3, it doesn't really matter. And also 3 example calculations of how you figured out those rope distance. Just by hand or type up, do the math, show me how you figured out the position of those events along your rope geologic timescale. And then last, so that's the first thing you need to submit, is a document with Part 1 and all of those various things associated with Part 2. The last thing you need to submit is the short narrated video, which you can produce easily with your phone. So you can submit that as a separate file. Don't make it too long. 1 to 2 minutes is all we need. All right, that is the end of Module 9 assignment. Please let me know if you have any questions. Have fun.